Technology trigger here was IIS Windows NT 4 option pack came out in 1997. And what this allowed, what this did was it allowed you to write a web application if you had IIS installed, and then you install a database with Microsoft SQL Server or Access, I guess. PHP also, PHP version 2 came out in 97. So here we are, like around 97 was this kind of standardized way of starting to write web applications, and people are starting to write them. Well, it takes almost 2 years. Two years later, 2 years later, I don't know if anyone remembers Rainforest Puppy. Pretty awesome security researcher. If it was a Hall of Fame, he'd be in it. And he comes up with this thing called the Windows NT ODBC remote compromise, where he sees that this option pack comes shipped with sample applications which take input in the form field, and then they call the backend database with that input. And he says, wait a minute, I can put commands in this input and it'll execute in the database. And he's actually just using the database's shell commands to go out and execute commands on the system. So this looks pretty bad. And this is shipping as a sample. It's on everyone's machine. But I think what happened was people didn't realize that this is basically a fundamental new class of vulnerability where attackers are getting direct access to databases through web forms. And this was the programming style that PHP used and Visual Basic for applications, which became Active Server Pages used at the time. So he made a big deal about this in NT Bug Track and Bug Track. And he's like, this is a huge new thing. He's hyping it. And what do people say? They say, well, just delete the sample apps. Just delete the sample apps and it'll all go away. It's the easy fix. People don't understand the fundamental problem. They just do the bare minimum fix to make it go away without understanding the platform. Well, a year later, the guy who wrote Achilles certainly understood the platform. A year later, he writes Achilles, which is a proxy-based attack tool. And then over the next year or two, web proxy, we built that at AppState. I was part of. Paris comes out, and recently Burp. And so this is the attack automation phase. Now everyone's doing SQL injection. But while this is happening, people are just blissfully developing web applications exactly in the same style that Rainforest Puppy woke us up to in 1999. The attackers are taking advantage of this, but the people who are building the technology aren't. So there's something fundamentally wrong here with the way that we're using the information out there. The attackers are using the information that the researchers are providing, and they're using the tools, but the people building the technology are just going on their merry way, ignoring this. So of course, SQL injection is probably, maybe Windows malware is the only more widespread problem. This led to Heartland Payment Systems, the largest credit card breach in history, was because of a SQL injection flaw on their perimeter, which allowed the attackers to get inside 50 million credit cards, hundreds of millions of dollars in costs for something that was discovered 10 years earlier and was ignored by their developers. And then just a data point of how widespread it is: 500,000 websites in a way compromised by a worm. I mean, that's a lot of vulnerable websites. So moving on to something even older, Windows malware, or Windows Trojans. Technology trigger here is Windows 95. Actually, to be pedantic, it was Windows 95 BSD or something like that, which actually included a TCP/IP stack. So the technology trigger here is we're going to throw a TCP/IP stack on an operating system that has no notion of security, no notion of privilege levels, and let people click on links, and it's going to say, do you want to install this? And it's going to install it. Pretty horrible when you think about it now, right? When you think about it, like, who would ever deploy something like that and put that in the hands of just the average person to use, right? It just seems crazy. Well, a couple of years later, or actually 3 years later, a guy named Sadistic at the Cult of the Dead Cow said, this is crazy, and I'm going to prove to you how crazy it is. I'm going to write back orifice, and I'm going to make it freely available for everyone to do. And Cult of the Dead Cow, you don't get more colorful than this, right? Guys like, the death vegetable and, mirror shades and long hair is going, this is crazy. Microsoft is crazy. They've released this. This is a huge gaping problem. And, we're showing you how bad it is, right? We're making this freely available. Anyone in the world can now hack a Windows 95 machine. So what happened? We heard these responses. We use antivirus at our company, and antivirus detects bad orifice. So Windows malware is not a problem. The user needs to install it. If the user needs to install it, it's not a problem, right? And my favorite one was, this one was from Microsoft. They said, back orifice doesn't work on NT. Use NT, and you'll be secure. Right? It's crazy when you think about it. That was the solution. Don't fix the fundamental problem. Use an operating system that Sadistic didn't have access to, so he didn't have the right SDK available to write his tool for NT. It's the only reason it didn't work on NT. Partner of mine from the law, Dildog, decided he was going to write BO2K because he didn't like that answer from Microsoft. He said, this is crazy. So we'll just write it for Windows 2000, and we'll show that the exact same problem happens on NT and Windows 2000. But still, that didn't seem to change anything. The fundamental problem is there. It's still there today. And I don't want to go into attack automation for Windows Trojans, because that could be a whole day-long seminar of all the ways that attackers have come up to trick people into installing Windows Trojans. There's got to be a dozen different ways that you can talk about. So, obviously, widespread attacks for the last 10 years, about botnets. Recent data point from Insecurity, 66% of the 25 million malware sample were banking Trojans. 66%, 12 years later, after back orifice showed that this is just a huge problem. Now we have the majority of malware floating around is exactly the kind of Trojan like back orifice. And I throw this up there, this risks of webcams. I don't know how many of you heard, there was a student that committed suicide at Rutgers University because his roommates used his laptop camera to videotape him having sex and just distributed the tape everywhere. And so on CNN, all these security pundits are getting on saying everyone should be aware, if an attacker takes over your machine with one of these Trojans, they can use your webcam. Well, that was functionality that was in back orifice in 1997. Back orifice came with that functionality 13 years ago, and now people are on CNN talking about it. So I want to go through one more example, mobile applications. So this is the hot new technology trigger of today, right? 2008 or so, we have the iPhone comes out. The BlackBerry says, hey, I have apps too, you can download apps for me. And then in 2009, we got Android. So obviously this is on a fast growth curve. And while it's being totally hyped by the platform providers and the app developers, we have the